ब्रेक तो बाद ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਚਰਚਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ ਸਨਅਤ ਬਾਰੇ। ਕਾਮਨਾ ਜੀ, what sort of participation you are expecting from the government, particularly in case of Punjab?
If we say that we are, it's all the industry's responsibility in upgradation, modernization, skilling, that's not possible. Alternately, if we say it's totally the government's responsibility, again that would be incorrect. But there has to be a hand holding. The VAT collections of the government, I believe, have gone up from 5,000 crores to 25,000 crores. This is an industry contribution, and I think a part of it.
Major contribution is from industry.
Well, it is a contribution. I wouldn't say major or minor, but I think it is a sizable contribution. And a percentage, however small, but a clear-cut percentage of this must come back into the industry for propping the industry up, for bringing it up to terms. I think the government needs to designate that amount of money, and then I think there should be a stakeholders participation on how it should be disbursed, because a portion of it definitely needs to go into modernization. I think Punjab will lose it if we don't quickly modernize, and I must emphasize that we are a huge MSME which does not have capabilities of that kind of funding. We are not looking at freebies because we understand the state is under funding pressure, but we are looking at things like the CLCSS scheme, which had come earlier, where it was tied up to an entrepreneur's investment. So it became more like an interest-free sort of a loan, which gives impetus and encouragement to the industry. It motivates them to invest. It's a forward-looking thing, and it is not an imposition or not a huge imposition on the government's exchequer. Besides that, the government also needs to realize that there is now a huge risk taking which automatically happens when you grow. The SME is not geared up for that kind of risk taking. So there must be a sort of model where there is a sharing of expansion and innovation. Otherwise, how does an entrepreneur innovate? He cannot do it at his own risk when his funding is so small. An entrepreneur wants to start a business. If he goes, the interest rates in India are phenomenal. They are not conducive to growth. So how would the state assist in that? If a portion of this money is set aside and then the stakeholders, the industry decides that how they want to allocate this, I think it would create a synergy, and I think it would create a dynamic growth.
You want that stakeholders from industry should
From
have more participation in the policy making.
Yeah, absolutely. Once a certain amount of money is allocated, then let us collectively decide what it is that will in the short term give the industry impetus and then create a long term plan. So I think both need to be looked at.
Ma'am, there are two sort of questions related with the industry. One is the traditional industry of Punjab. How can we look after that? And then what are the new possibilities of the industries? So how do you look at
Absolutely. I don't think you can weed out an industry which has been existing here for decades. If we look at, say, for example, the engineering sector. Bicycles did very well. There's a lot of auto parts, there is pressings, there's forgings, there's castings.
Sports, machinery, agriculture implements.
I mean, Punjab is an engineering wizard, but our shortcoming lies in the fact that we are not close to raw materials. So there is an added cost to that. What does one do in such a situation? The only thing is add value addition. I mean, if you convert steel at a higher level of value addition, you don't consider the transport cost. Whereas now, because we are at the low end of the rung, we are fighting even the cost of movement of raw material, which should in effect become immaterial if we upgrade technologically. So it will really become a win-win situation. These are our traditional business forms. Textiles, for example, again, there we need an upgradation there. So I think the whole industry is crying out for modernization. Then again, there is the vision of what the state should invest in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So let us create a vision plan. For example, we talk about agro. Agro is our base. It's the soul of the state. But are we really adding value to what we produce? We are not. So how does the government want to synergize that? How does the government want to bring to the entrepreneur that, look, you want to invest? Okay, so this is an area which is going to show phenomenal growth in the next 30 years. This is your role and this is our role as the government. Pick it up. And trust me, I think Punjabis are absolutely hands-on. They are ready to adventure. They are ready to come in, provided they feel the confidence that they're not going to get rolled over. So I think a big role of the government is really to bring in the motivation and to bring in the encouragement.
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਜਸਪਾਲ ਜੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਰੋਲ ਹੋਣ ਵਾਲਾ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੱਚੇ ਮਾਲ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੂਰਤੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਬਿਜਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਮੁਹੱਈਆ ਕਰਵਾਉਣਾ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਸਿਖਲਾਈ ਦੇ ਮਾਮਲਿਆਂ 'ਚ
ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਾਨਾ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ raw material is a very important requirement, so we have to get raw materials, but at the same time I agree with her 100% that value addition will play a very important role irrespective of the fact from where you are getting the raw material. The cost of the raw material, even if it is very important, the cost of transportation to the point of utilization.
Just let me give you an example. In sports industry we were depending on Kashmiri willows. Now they have stopped. There are certain legal restriction on that they want to promote their own industry. So Punjabi sports industry is facing crisis. How will we cope up with that sort of situation?
No, this type of solution you say, take for example, I have served 37 years in the defence and we are still importing 100,000 crore worth of goods per annum from foreign countries because our own industry has not come up. And whatever the industry we have developed in the country, for example the central public sector enterprises and the defence public sector units that we have developed and all that sort of thing, they have not come up to the standards of quality production which the defence services require. So private sector must be given a level playing field for the purpose of growth, which is not there. For example, all imports which the central public sector undertaking is doing, they are free of duties. But where if any private sector in Punjab extra imports the same thing to produce the same item, they have to put something like 30 to 40%, sometimes more than that as duty. So they are not competitive to take part in the tenders and things like that. So first of all, there should be a level playing field between the central and state enterprises and with the private sector. That's one thing. Second thing is incentives. Now if you are importing such a huge quantity of weapons and things like that from foreign countries, and you are paying only, and here if you ask your own industry to come up and match those standards and give them some incentive in terms of tax holidays and things like that, that will work wonders. So all these sort of things the government has to play a very important role. And as I earlier said, labor quality.
So there are lots of possibilities.
There are plenty of possibilities where the state can play, as he said, holding hand for the private sector.
Neena ji, I have a question. The issue is when the raw material is away from the manufacturing units and then the shortage of electricity. You have worked in these areas. How will you think that Punjab can solve these issues, particularly the shortage of electricity, as you have worked as consultant with lots of electricity producing companies?
So I think the electricity generation issue has more or less been sorted out by the government in the next 4 to 5 years interim. I mean, not immediately, but as these power generation units are going to come up.
But lots of governments are claiming for 5-6 years that we will be electricity surplus
So they
state
would be
within
electricity
next
surplus,
3
absolutely,
days.
and surplus enough to give it to the neighboring states. I think the issue that they are
But
facing
it
today,
has not become a reality.
No, it has not become, it will become. I think the issue that they're facing today is another obstacle from the government, which is that the raw material. Now there are organizations that we work with which are going outside of India to purchase mines. Now why should you have a country which has a surplus of say coal not being able to access that coal for their own generation? So I think there are some issues at the top level which the government needs to be cognizant of. But I just wanted to make another comment which is going to be a little separate from what we've been saying, and you did talk about dividing industry into prevalent and new. I think the question this government can address in a sure-footed way is what are some of the progressive industries that you can bring to the state today, which would not have encumbrances of raw material, etc., etc. Because we saw a lot of dynamism in the entrepreneurs who came from the state. That is lacking today.
What sort of industry can be suitable for Punjab?
I'm talking about education, for instance. Education could be one area where entrepreneurs need to put the stake on the ground. They need to invest, because if you have a skill gap in the industry and the industry demands it, there should be stakeholders, there should be private people who should be willing to invest in that and actually bridge that skill gap, which recently has really hit the state. The other area that I can think of is the entire, the produce that you have in the state. How are you ensuring that besides value addition, that it's actually reaching the right hands? The cold chain, the entire retail infrastructure, the agri-business and derivatives thereof, the export, there are so many opportunities that the state is rife with. Are the entrepreneurs using that opportunity? Are they really being able to monetize it? The other question that I'm often plagued with when I interact with some of the people from the state are the scale-up issue. I think whilst they have an idea and they're able to bring it to a certain level, the scale-up is usually an issue. I think how can we bring best practices, global know-how, either in technology aspect or from even a leadership aspect, to actually help them ramp up and scale up.
I think Kamna ji would like to respond to these questions.
I absolutely agree with her that Punjab has this problem. We have this entrepreneurial energy which keeps you propped up to a level. Beyond that, probably the risk taking becomes too much or our visions become limited. Now, I think the state also has another role to play in actually bringing policy and bringing the remedial measures that the center or the state has to the stakeholder, to the person in the industry. I feel that at a lot of times there is an availability of funds, for example. There is an availability of a scheme, but it doesn't reach. It doesn't reach out. So I think advocacy from the government's point of view needs to be on the agenda. They need to send out people in the field. The interactivity with the industry has to be far more. Clusters is a good word nowadays. Everybody talks about clusters. I have been working on various platforms in the industry, and I've realized that the cluster ideology just is not setting in with the MSME of Punjab. There is a fear factor. They don't want to share. They don't do rocket science.
What sort of fear factor?
Well, they feel that the security of their product, once they work in a group, is going to go away, which may not necessarily be true, which is not necessarily true. But are we addressing that? Are we addressing the psychological level of the industry? We can bring in ideas, but if they don't register or they don't go to grassroots levels,
I think this is important point that Jaswal would like to respond.
As far as clusters are concerned, it has proved to be a success in most places in the world.
हाँ जी बिल्कुल संक्षेप से तुसी गल करनी है.
ਕਲਸਟਰ ਫਾਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਾਲ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਫਾਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਲਸਟਰਸ ਹੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਬੈਨੀਫਿਟ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਛੋਟੀਆਂ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਸਐਮਐਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਇਹ ਇੰਡੀਵਿਜੂਅਲੀ ਕਈ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਲਸਟਰ 'ਚ ਰਲ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ ਇਲੈਕਟ੍ਰੋਪਲੇਟਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਫੋਰਜਿੰਗਸ ਹੈ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਟ੍ਰੀਟਮੈਂਟਸ ਹੈ ਹੀਟ ਟ੍ਰੀਟਮੈਂਟਸ ਹੈ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਜਿਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯੂਟਿਲਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਿਸੇ ਸਮਾਲ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰਾਈਜ਼ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਬੜੇ ਥੋੜੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਲਸਟਰ ਕਰ ਲਓ even for the purpose of globalization some design development is
ਪਰ ਇਹਦਾ ਦੂਜਾ ਐਸਪੈਕਟ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਮਲਟੀਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਕੰਪਨੀਆਂ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਇਸੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਓਵਰਪਾਵਰ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਵੱਡੀਆਂ
ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੰਪਨੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਕਲਸਟਰ ਫਾਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਨਾ ਪਵੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ
ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ
ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਸਮਾਲ ਐਂਡ ਮੀਡੀਅਮ ਐਂਟਰਪ੍ਰਾਈਜ਼ਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਐਪਲੀਕੇਬਲ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਾਡਲ ਹੈਗੇ ਇਹ ਹਾਈਲੀ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ in China, it is highly successful in East Asia countries and things like that.
ਤੇ ਹਿੰਦੁਸਤਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ?
ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਤੇ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ.
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ. ਹਾਂਜੀ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ. ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਐਨ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਵੇਅਰ ਵੀ ਕੈਨ ਐਂਡ ਦਿਸ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ.
ਮੈਂ ਛੋਟਾ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਐਡ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਗਲੋਬਲਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਜ਼ ਦੀ ਵੇ ਟੂ improve yourself. And please consider the globalization most important thing. China has become so powerful only because its high level exports and our exports even today are extremely limited.
Thank you very much for participating. Thank you very much. ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਚਰਚਾ ਤੋਂ ਸਪਸ਼ਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਨਅਤੀ ਵਿਕਾਸ ਨੂੰ ਯਕੀਨੀ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਕਈ ਪੱਧਰ ਉੱਤੇ ਪਹਿਲ ਕਦਮੀਆਂ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ. ਇਹ ਵੀ ਤੈਅ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਨਅਤ ਦਾ ਵਿਕਾਸ ਦੂਜੇ ਖੇਤਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਕਾਸ ਲਈ ਸਹਾਈ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ. ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਖਤਮ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ. ਨਮਸਕਾਰ, ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਖੁਦਾ ਹਾਫਿਜ਼.